Hey team, hope you're ready for some week 2 notes. I think most of you did okay with week 1. If you need anything, make sure you let me know because I don't know if you're struggling unless you tell me. If you decide that you're not going to finish out college algebra, make sure that you let Mr. Siegel know. If you are taking it for dual credit and you decide that you're not going to finish it out, make sure that you let the college know as well. So be aware of that. Otherwise, we are ready to keep on keeping on. So last week we did long division. There is a shortcut, but it doesn't always work. So that is what we're going to start out with today. It is called synthetic division, and you should remember this from Algebra 2, but synthetic division does not always work. It only works when you're dividing by x plus a number or x minus a number. So if you have an x squared or a 2x or anything like that, you can't do this. So it's a handy little trick. Some of you are going to be like, I really like long division and I'm going to do it all the time. And that's fine. But synthetic division is so much faster that you're going to want to get used to it. So let's try it. We're going to try an example. We're going to use synthetic division to divide 5x cubed plus 6x plus 8 by x plus 2. So to set it up, we're going to take the numbers from the front of our equation, 5x cubed. And then there isn't an x squared, so I'm going to put in a 0, the 6, and the 8. And then we have x plus 2. So since it's with the x, I always change the sign, and I'm going to put a -2 out here. And we're ready to go. The first thing I'm going to do is just drop that 5 down. First step, always just drop that front number down. And then we multiply. We take that 5 times -2 and put it right here under the 0, -10. And from here, it's just add, multiply, until we get to the end. So 0 plus -10 is -10. -10 times -2 is +20. 6 plus 20 is 26. Times -2 is -52. Plus 8 is -44. And that's it. We're done. That doesn't look like much of an answer, but that just means we have to write it in our x terms. So we started with 5x to the third. We subtract 1 from that exponent and plug it back in. So instead of 5x to the third, this is going to become 5x squared minus 10x plus 26. And that last number is always your remainder, which you put over what you were dividing by. So my answer is 5x squared minus 10x plus 26 plus -44 over x plus 2. So if you want to recap, we rewrote our equation. 5x to the third, there was 0x squareds, a 6x, and an 8. Drop that first one down. Multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, add. And then you take whatever you started with, subtract the exponent by 1, and put them in with your answer. The last number is always your remainder. We're going to try one more. Make sure you feel good. So our next example, we're going to do x to the third plus 4x squared minus 5x plus 5 divided by x plus 3. If you want to try it on your own first, pause it and try it on your own. So we write out 1x to the third, 4x squared, -5x plus 5. And we always change the sign on that, so we're going to put a +3 out there. First step, drop that 1 down. 1 times 3 is 3. 4 plus 3 is 7. 7 times 3 is 21. -5 plus 21 is 16. 16 times 3 is 48. Plus 5 is 53. We want to write our answer as an equation. So I started with x cubed. So that's going to be 1x squared plus 7x plus 16. And then my remainder is 53 over x minus 3. So hopefully that makes sense because we're going to use it in what we do for the rest of these notes. So this takes us to what we call the factor theorem. The factor theorem is talking about polynomials just like we talk about numbers. If I say that the remainder when I divide is 0, then that number I divided by is a factor, right? Like if I say 100 divided by 25 is 4, there's a remainder of 0. Then 25 is a factor of 100. And then the opposite of that is also true. If 25 is a factor of 100, then the remainder will be 0. So we can say this about polynomials. If I divide by something and get a remainder of 0, then I've found a factor. Or if I know something is a factor, then there will be a remainder of 0. So we can use that to solve equations and to find factors. So it says we want to solve this equation if we know that 3 is a 0 or a solution of the equation. So what do I do? If we tried to just solve this out, if we tried to factor it the way that it is, it wouldn't work. We can't group it because 2 and 3 aren't going to have anything in common with 11 and 6. So we have to do it a different way. They're telling me 3 is going to be an answer. 3 is a solution. 3 is going to be a factor. Except that 3 isn't going to be the factor. If we work backwards a little bit, 3 is a solution means that x equals 3. If I want to make that equal to 0, it'd be x minus 3, right? So I'm going to synthetic divide by 3 because there's no x there, right? It doesn't say x minus 3 or x plus 3. So we just synthetic divide by 3. Drop down the 2. 2 times 3 is 6. Negative 3 plus 6 is 3. 3 times 3 is 9. Negative 11 plus 9 is negative 2. Negative 2 plus 3 is negative 6. And 6 plus negative 6 is 0. We get a remainder of 0. That's what we wanted to happen. So what does that mean? What do I have left? 2, 3, negative 2. Since I started with x to the third, that's 2x squared plus 3x minus 2. So x minus 3 comes from the fact that 3 is a 0. That means x equals 3. So x minus 3 gives me that x equals 3. And then 2x squared plus 3x minus 2 is where that comes from right there. So now I want to solve this equation because I know these two equations are the exact same thing. So I solve that by setting it equal to 0 and saying, hey, can I factor 2x squared plus 3x minus 2? You have two ways of factoring that. If you do 2 times negative 2, that's negative 4. Factors of negative 4 that make 3 would be 4 and negative 1. And then split the middle, group them, and you'll end up with 2x minus 1 and x plus 2 when you're all done. Set those equal to 0, solve them out, and you get your answers. You get x equals 3, x equals 1/2, and x equals 2. So you get 3 answers there. The 3 that they already told me in the problem, 1/2, and negative 2. So we're going to try those on a couple more here in a minute. So what happens though if they don't give me one in the problem? What if they don't say, hey, 3 is 1 to start with? You can find all your possibilities by putting the factors of the constant, the last number, over factors of the lead coefficient, the first number. For example, list all the possible rational zeros of 15x cubed plus 14x squared minus 3x minus 2. So these aren't all the actual answers, these are just all the possibilities. So you put factors of the last one, negative 2, over factors of the first one, 15. So what multiplies to make negative 2? Well, you could do negative 1 times 2 or 1 times negative 2. So we just put plus or minuses on everything. What multiplies to make 15? Well, 1 or 3 or 5 or 15. But I could have like negative 1 times negative 15. So we just put plus or minuses on everything. So now I've got to find all the combinations that I can do to divide those. Like 1 divided by 1 is 1. 1 divided by 3 is 1/3. 1 divided by 5 is 1/5. 1 divided by 15 is 1/15. 2 divided by 1 is 2. 2/3, 2/5, 2/15. And they each get a plus or minus. So those are all the possible rational zeros. It doesn't mean they're answers, it just means they're possibilities. When you get to your homework on my math lab, some of them are going to say, what are all the possible rational zeros? This is what you would type in for that first step. So that brings us to actually finding all the zeros. Find all the zeros of f of x equals x cubed plus 2x squared minus 5x minus 6. Find all the zeros. Find all the solutions. Solve the equation. Those all mean the same thing. So the first thing we're going to do is find those possibilities. So we put factors of -6 over factors of 1. There's that invisible 1 there. So factors of 6 would be 1, 2, 3, and 6. Factors of 1 are just 1. So 1 divided by 1, 2 divided by 1, 3 divided by 1, 6 divided by 1. So my possibilities are plus or minus 1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 6. So I've got lots of choices. And now we're just going to start synthetic dividing until we get a remainder of 0. So I'm going to synthetic divide this equation by 1. I drop my 1. 1 times 1 is 1. That's 3 times 1 is 3. That's -2 times 1 is -2. I get -8 as a remainder, so 1 is no good. Let's try 2. 1 times 2 is 2. 4 times 2 is 8. 3 times 2 is 6. I get a remainder of 0. Perfect. So what does that mean? That means that I've got 2 I know works. That means x minus 2 is a factor. And then I started with x to the third, so 1x squared plus 4x plus 3. I make that and I see if I can factor it. X minus 2 stays. Factors of 3 that make 4 would be 3 and 1. I set those equal to 0. So my answers are 2, -3, and -1. All right. We're going to try one more, and it's a tricky one. X to the third plus 7x squared plus 11x minus 3. So first I find my possibilities. Factors of -3 over factors of 1. The only thing that makes -3 would be plus or minus 1, plus or minus 3. The only thing that makes 1 is plus or minus 1. Divide by 1, I get plus or minus 1 and plus or minus 3 for my possibilities. So I start synthetic dividing. You can synthetic divide by plus or minus 1 and plus or minus 3, and you keep going until you find one that works. I'm going to go with -3 because I have a little secret knowledge here. And guess what? -3 works. Cool. So x minus -3, x plus 3, that's how I would get that, right? And then since I started with x to the third, that's going to be 1x squared plus 4x minus 1. So then I say, okay, can I factor that anymore? What are factors of -1 that make 4? There aren't any, are there? So I can set x plus 3 equal to 0, and I get x equals -3. There's one of my answers. Cool. But if I set x squared plus 4x minus 1 equal to 0, I can't factor it, so guess what we have to do? Quadratic formula. So I do -b, that's -4, plus or minus big square root, b squared, so 4 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is -1, all over 2 times a, which is 1. So that's -4 plus or minus 4 squared is 16. 4 times 1 times -1 is -4. So -4 would be plus 4. 16 plus 4 is 20, all over 2. We can break down the square root of 20. That'd be 4 and 5, 2 and 2 and 5. There's a pair of 2's. So I have -4 plus or minus 2 square roots of 5 over 2. They all have a 2 in common. So that gives me -2 plus or minus the square root of 5. So my zeros, my solutions are -3 and -2 plus or minus the square root of 5. Oof, I told you that one was rough. So that's how you find all the zeros. That's how you solve the equation. Those mean the same thing. You find your possibilities. You try your possibilities till you find one with a remainder of 0. You rewrite it, and then you either factor it or you quadratic it. So you should end up with 3 or 4 answers. It just depends on what your starting equation was. With that, you are ready for week 2 homework on my math lab. I kind of changed the plan. We were going to do our unit 4 test next week, but I decided that this was probably enough for this week without graphing. So we're going to graph next week, and then we will do our test the week after next. So that's our plan now. Let me know if you have any questions or if you need anything, and I have faith in you. You can do this. Good job.